Welcome back to GB News. You're watching the Camilla Tominey Show. I'm delighted to be joined now by Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry. Hopefully she can hear me. Lovely to see you this morning. I don't think you've spoken to me before on my show, so it's really lovely to have you on. Thank you. You've made an announcement this morning about prisons and that you want to create more space in our already very overcrowded prisons. How many prisons would you like to build? When will you build them by? And how much will they cost?
So we're going to build 20,000 places, which is what the Conservatives promised that they were going to do, but they only managed to build 6,000. We don't know why. There seem to be 2 places that have been identified for 2 prisons, and the money has been allocated, and yet they haven't spent it. We know that there is an absolute crisis in our criminal justice system. We've had judges advised to go slow on cases. We've had police officers advised not to arrest too many people. We've had a whole lot of prisoners who've been released because the prisons are just about, overflowing. And they just seem to be, it's kind of like it's a really good example of just like what's gone wrong with this government. They just seem to have totally run out of steam. They seem to be incapable of, even when there's a place, even when there's money, even when there's a need, they still don't seem to be able to do it. So all we're saying is,
so how quickly will you repair the situation and how much will it cost?
So it's going to take a while, obviously, as with everything else in relation to this government, because the place is just such a mess. So there are 2 sites that have been identified, and we will make sure. And Shabana has spoken this morning about this, who's the Shadow Justice Minister, and she's spoken about it already, and she has said there are 2 sites that have been identified, and her first priority will be making sure that those prisons are actually built, and we need to get on with that, and then we will need to find further sites. And what we're saying is we will use this money that the government identified, and then we will also, if necessary, we will make sure that the Secretary of State takes control of the planning process, because this is a matter of national priority. We cannot allow our criminal justice system to fall over in this way.
OK. The other area of public life which is overcrowded are state schools, Miss Thornberry. Now, Labour is proposing to put VAT on school fees. I've asked so far on this show 4 shadow ministers to answer this question, and I haven't been able to get an answer. So I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, you'll be able to answer it. If there is this predicted exodus from the private sector into the state sector come September, when the polls are saying it's likely Labour will be in power, where will you accommodate those private school pupils? Will the party have to be building temporary classrooms? You'll have to find more school places, won't you? Probably upwards of 5,000, 10,000?
So, first of all, I think that the private education sector are exaggerating this claim of the number of people who will leave private education. If you look at the way in which fees have gone up over the last few years, they have gone up exponentially. So adding VAT to it, of course it will increase fees, but they have gone up hugely over the last few years, and yet people have still been able to afford to send their children there. So I do question, the numbers that the private sector are putting forward.
It's not the private sector though, is it? It's the IFS. VAT. The IFS have predicted up to 40,000 private school pupils will go into the state sector. That's an independent body.
All right. But nevertheless, there are places. Listen, there are places in the secondary schools and primary schools in my area, and certainly in central London. So if they live in central London, there are plenty of places available, and they don't need to worry about it. I've spoken to constituents of mine who are concerned. Well, if they are concerned, then they will join the state sector. And what we need to do, what I need to do as a politician, is make sure that the state sector provides schools that are outstanding, that actually people don't want to send their children anywhere else than to the local state schools, because the local state schools are fantastic. That's what we need to do.
But Labour have criticised.
But hang on. Hang on, what I want to say is this, right, is remember what it is that we're spending the money on. And this really speaks to the state that we're in as a nation. What we want to do is we want to raise the VAT in order to pay for additional teachers and to give children breakfast in the morning, because so many
Yes.
children going to our state schools go to school hungry. That's where we are, Camilla, and we need to have a government that's prepared to do something about it, and that's what we're going to do.
It's worthy aims, but the criticism of the policy is that it's going to be pushing more private school pupils into already overcrowded state schools. The Labour Party has made quite a meal of this. They've said that schools are overcrowded and that the quality of these schools need to rise. How on earth do you solve that problem by injecting what is predicted to be up to 40,000 private school pupils into state schools? Also, incidentally, the teaching unions aren't happy about it. The National Education Union has said that if this costs private school teachers their jobs, they will be angry, rightfully, with the Labour Party. So it's also a policy that might cost teachers their jobs. And, by the way, it's already closed down 2 independent schools.
As I already said, there are schools that certainly have vacancies. You know, there are my primary schools and my secondary schools have space, and they're very welcome. And they are good schools, and people should send their children there. I mean, it's fine, you know. And if we have to, in the short term, have larger classes, we have larger classes. You know,
so you will make classes larger to accommodate.
The birth rate goes up and down.
Right. How big should classes be to accommodate this policy?
Oh, come on. What we need to do is we need to raise the money in order to make sure that children going to state schools have had breakfast. That's what our priority is. And we need to raise the money from somewhere. And what we're going to do is we are saying everything we're going to spend money on, we're saying where the money is coming from. Because we will have a properly costed manifesto, and all our spending commitments will be costed, and we will be able to say where it comes from. And sure, you know, there may well be complaints about it. I understand that. But I'm afraid that if I have a choice between putting VAT on private schools and making sure that the children in my area can have breakfast before they start learning, I know where I am.
But it does sound as if you've got a choice between putting VAT on private schools and having larger class sizes. I mean, one of Tony Blair's pledges famously was to keep class sizes at 30. You're now saying that class sizes should be higher to accommodate your own policy. So how big should classes be? 35, 40?
There are classes that are larger, but I tell you what's happened is that because of the underfunding of schools, the number of classroom assistants has gone. So it used to be that you would have a teacher within a school, but you'd also have a classroom assistant, and they've gone. You know, in private schools that I have visited, the classes are 8, 9, 10, you know, fantastic, and they only have one teacher. In state schools, they no longer have the number of classroom assistants that they used to. That is a tragedy. We underfund our state system, and what we are doing is ensuring that we begin, as one of our first steps, is to make sure that we're putting more funding into the state sector. We're going to have more teachers. There's another 16,000 teachers coming. We're going to make sure that the children are fed. You know, it's not it's not much to ask. And if it means putting VAT on private schools, I mean, the question is, right? No, wait, and let me just say this. The question is it appropriate in these circumstances for schools such as in Eton or Winchester or whatever to be seen as a charity, and that therefore they should not be paying VAT on the huge fees that are already charged? I mean, honestly,
the counter argument to that, Ms. Thornberry, isn't it? The counter argument to that is it might be counterintuitive to be punishing the private sector and then end up punishing the state sector too, because it's so overcrowded it can't accommodate the extra pupils. We're fast running out of time. Quick yes/no answer.
Well, I mean, that's
if you're
your point
going
of view. I don't agree with you. You know,
we love agreeable disagreement on this channel, Ms. Thornberry. So I'm glad that we've had this conversation. We're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, because we are fast running out of time. But I do appreciate you. You're the first person, to be fair to you, have given an answer to that question beyond rhetoric. So I do thank you, and thank you for joining me this morning.